Hello, welcome back to Crafty Crandall. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the books that really got me through my formative years. So I started reading from the age of 10 years old, and I'm going to discuss books that I read up until about the age 17 or so. So books that I read throughout middle school and high school that really set my reading up for what it is today. The first book on this list is, of course, none other than Harry Potter. Now, I think that's true for a lot of readers my age. We grew up when Harry Potter was first coming out. It was a big thing, and it just felt like you were kind of growing up with Harry as he went through his journeys. So I know that there's a lot of controversy surrounding the Harry Potter verse right now, and I'm not going to get into any of that. I would be lying if I said that my reading was not completely, foundationalized by Harry Potter. So Harry Potter was the first book that I ever read, other than books that were read to me or books that I had to read for school. But really the first pleasure reading that I did was Harry Potter. And it was funny because I actually picked it up when I was around, I think in like fourth grade, and I didn't like it. I got to like chapter 3 and I had to put the book down. I didn't like it. I think in part it was because the names were foreign to me. I didn't really understand what was going on. And the whole scene where the Dursleys take Harry out to the cliffs, I didn't understand what was going on. So I stopped reading at that point. And moving forward about a year, I think the first movie had just come out, and I realized that if I really wanted to see and enjoy this movie, then I had to read the book. So I went back to the library, I checked it out again, and I started reading, and I fell in love. I don't know why it was so much easier to read the second time. I mean, I was a year or two older, and I think that at that point I was ready to start reading. I had progressed enough in reading in school that I felt like I had the ability to do it, whereas when I was younger, I strayed away from reading. Reading was always my worst subject in school. I was a very high-achieving math and science kid. I didn't value reading, so I think that really kind of impacted my early experience with Harry Potter, but moving forward, I obviously overcame that and got better. So yeah, Harry Potter, number one formative book that I read, and really the first book that I kind of used as a stepping stone to get into other books. Now the second book on this list is, let me rephrase that, because all of these are going to be series, with the exception of one book. So the second series that I really jumped into is the Blue is for Nightmare series by Laurie, Faria, Stolarz. Now, to be 100% honest, I don't really recall what this book is about, or this series. This was actually given to me by one of my friends who discovered that I liked reading as well, because I was reading Harry Potter while waiting for a class one time, and she approached me and ended up giving me the Blue is for Nightmares book to read, because I had expressed to her that I needed something new to read, and so she gave me that to borrow. And although I don't recall much of what it was about today, I do remember really loving that series. It was, a school setting, and, as well as Harry Potter. And I believe that there was a lot of more paranormal activity or that sort of thing, that sort of fantasy spin on it going on. And I remember really enjoying them. Now, I have since gone back and reread the Goodreads reviews on these books, and let me tell you, they're not stellar. So I don't know if this would be a series that I would pick up today. However, growing up, this series meant a lot to me. Next series in this list is actually not even just one series. So I started reading Tamora Pierce books right alongside the Blue is for Nightmare series, because my friend also gave me those to read as well. And let me tell you, those books followed me from the time I was given them. I think it was 11 or 12 when we started reading them, all the way up through high school. I mean, there are so many books in that universe, and I just absolutely love them, including actually the most recent release, Tempest and Slaughter and the Meyer Chronicles. Even that book, I cannot wait for a sequel to that book. Tamora Pierce has just been an author that I've absolutely loved. I've read every one of her books, and I honestly, thinking back on it, I would probably say she has to be my favorite author. And so every single one of those books was just a really formative experience for me. It got me into a more fantastical setting. Those books were my first foray into fantasy, and I will forever remember and love them for that. I really want to go back and do a reread through all of them and just, you know, start with the Elena Chronicles and move my way through with Kel and Becca Cooper and just everyone. It's just, that whole series was phenomenal, and I really want to read more of them. So that's those books. Nothing more to say on them really. I really recommend them to everyone. I would 100% pick those up again today. So I think that they've really stood the test of time, and if you are getting into reading fantasy, I would highly recommend them. The third series on this list is none other than Twilight. Now, Twilight is special. It holds a special place in my heart because through reading Twilight, I learned to express to other friends in school my love for reading, and we really gained a huge community of people in our school who were reading these all together, and we were all just able to come together and talk about books. And in adulthood, that's something I don't really have, is a huge community surrounding books. That's really why I kind of wanted to start this channel, is just to, you know, put it out there and maybe just have a community of people who are interested in the same books and want to talk about them. Now, as somebody who watches a lot of booktube videos, I think that's really what we've kind of culminated here as far as booktube goes. So Twilight was really that formative series for me as far as communicating to other people about books. That's what it really brought to the table for me as a reader, and I really appreciated it for that. Now again, I know lots of controversy surrounding this series. I think that a lot of people kind of had a similar path in their reading, and now as adults we're all looking back and seeing, you know, the problematic elements of these books and, you know, potentially their authors. So I realize that is the case, but it doesn't change how my reading life came to be what it is. So I'm including them in this video for that reason, not to say that I necessarily love these books today or that I support, you know, any of the things that their authors are doing. Regardless of that though, I do plan on reading Midnight Sun, if only for a dose of nostalgia and to bring me back to that universe. I think it'll be very fun. I have not picked it up yet. I've got a million other books that I want to read, but I will at some point be picking that book up. So looking forward to that. I'm sure I'll include it in a reading vlog at some point, so you can look forward to that as well. The final book that I want to talk about today is actually The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. So this book is the first time that I read a book for school that I actually enjoyed. Up until that point, I had never read a classic that I enjoyed. Everything that we read for school was just, you know, it had too much of a point, I guess, for me to really care. Now, after The Great Gatsby, we did read a few more books that I really did appreciate, but The Great Gatsby was really the first one that I read that I actually enjoyed for, like, the purpose of reading, like the pleasure of reading. I cared more about The Great Gatsby than any of the other books that we'd read for school, and so I would say that it's one of the most formative books as far as my education is concerned, and it's really one of the only classics that I enjoyed. I've read others, and, you know, I can appreciate them for what they are, but The Great Gatsby was one that just holds a special place in my heart and will, you know, forever be that book that made me realize that not all classics are bad. So if you haven't read The Great Gatsby, do recommend it. Great book, and maybe you will gain an appreciation for the classics as well. I was editing this video and I realized that I didn't really summarize like what each of those books meant to me. So, you know, in order of their mention, Harry Potter was, like I said, the first book that I read. So it was my stepping stone into reading. Now, obviously that series continued, you know, well past what I would consider to be my formative years. But if not for that very first book, I never would have continued on, and I wouldn't have, you know, I probably wouldn't have started reading until much later in my life. And I also probably wouldn't have made as close of friends as I did back in high school. So that's where that book really fits into, you know, this plot, if you will. The Tortall books, so all of the series within that, the Tamora Pierce realm of Tortall, those books really made me see that fantasy books didn't have to just be, you know, whimsical and, you know, just about the fantasy. I think those books were really empowering for females. Each of the main characters was a female. They were portrayed to you as like a strong, independent character. And I think that there was a lot of value in reading those when I did, because it just kind of solidified for me that that was a possibility. Regardless of the fact that they were within a fantastical realm, I think that those books really have an empowerment aspect to them for women. So highly recommend those on that regard, and I think that's really where they play into, you know, my regarding them as one of my more formative books for my reading life. The Twilight series, like I said, in addition to the Blue is for Nightmares series being a really social book for me, I think that the Twilight series was even more so that community-driven experience. That book had everybody forming an opinion. Were you Team Edward? Were you Team Jacob? Team Edward, by the way. And just everyone, you know, was drawing fan art. Everyone was writing fan fiction. It was just a huge community booster. And I think it was the first time that I really engaged in a more community-based reading platform, as opposed to just, you know, going back and forth with my one friend and exchanging opinions. That book really culminated a wide group of us into, you know, sharing our opinions, sharing our thoughts, etc. And finally, The Great Gatsby was really just a book that, you know, made me realize that maybe I could branch out into other genres. You know, being a classic, I felt like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be afraid of other classics or nonfiction. And so from that point, I really kind of learned to give other books a chance, you know, regardless of whether they were assigned or not. If something sounded interesting to me, I'd be more willing to give it a chance than I was prior to having read The Great Gatsby. It really opened and widened my reading horizons, if you will, and I really appreciate that impact on my reading, because I have definitely started reading, you know, a wider variety of topics in a wider variety of genres, and if it hadn't been for that book, I might never have really accepted the fact that I could read other things or would necessarily enjoy them. Not that I couldn't read them, but would it be worth my time? And I think that The Great Gatsby really helped me see that, yes, it would be worth my time to kind of explore other reading avenues. So that's all I have for you today. That is really my list of like formative books. I obviously read a ton of other books in my childhood and enjoyed, you know, a good portion of them, I would say. But these were just the ones that came back to me as the really important ones that made me the reader that I am today. And I'd be interested to hear if you had like a similar experience with any of them, if they were also books that you would say were formative for you. I think that, like I said, for a lot of us, at least, you know, around my age, I think that that is kind of like a trend that went on. Everyone was reading the same books. We all had a very similar experience if we were into, you know, reading fantasy as a teenager, if you will. So like I said, that's all I have for you today, but I would appreciate it if you would give this video a like, and if you would subscribe to my channel down below. That would mean a lot to me, and I will be coming at you again with more reading and art related content really soon. Thank you. Bye.